Hey, good morning, good afternoon, good evening. It's so great to be here again. I missed you guys last week. Oh my goodness, it was a travel day for me. And I was driving, I was on a road trip, and I was actually tempted to come on and talk to you guys while I was driving. And I thought, I wouldn't be able to read the chat. It would be dangerous, all these things. But I really did miss connecting with you all last week. And I hope that you had a great week so far. I did think of you though, as my email suggested. I did think of you guys because I had an amazing experience with a complete stranger in a social gathering. And I was able to, in a few seconds, sort out her hip pain at a social gathering. So I wanted to talk to you guys about that because I want you to be able to do that too when you're at a social gathering. It's like the best party trick there is. So welcome. I'm so glad you're here. Greg, I see that you're here. Who else popped in? Jetty, awesome. I'm so glad that you're here. Please feel free at any time to come on camera or come off mute or just use the chat to interact with me. I'm going to talk for like the first 20 to 30 minutes. I'm going to teach you anatomy, and then the second half of the hour will be open to Q&A. So any questions that you have, doesn't have to be about something that I shared. It could be another question that you came in with. It could be a client question. It can be an anatomy question, a training question. Any question, I'm here to serve. So please feel free to ask your questions, and you can use the chat if you want to, or come on camera or off mute. So for those of you who I haven't met before, I'm so glad that you're here. I'm Gina Schatz, the developer of the Schatz method, which is a movement and manual practice that I developed clinically while I was working with clients to get rid of their pain. And I know that you're all up to working with clients and doing good things for them, whether it's increase their function, decrease their pain, some variation thereof. And I'm right here with you. So I'm a movement and manual practitioner, licensed in a few different things. And I was looking for a solution because all the techniques that I was learning in all my continuing education were getting me some results, but not 100%. And I'm kind of an overachiever. So I wanted 100% results. So in that came the inception of the method that I use as a movement and manual practitioner. And I teach that method to others as well. So whether you are a movement or manual practitioner, you don't have to be both. This is like a segue in the middle, if you will, this method. So I love teaching my practitioners and in the mastery program. And another exciting piece of my road trip from last week is that on my way back, while I didn't get to meet with all of you live on Tuesday, I did get to stop on my halfway route and see one of my mastery practitioners in person. So we actually did our training session from her gym. She's a personal trainer. And so, oh my goodness, it was so much fun to meet one of mine in person. So I am so happy that you're here, even virtually. It's fantastic. And let's get into it. Let me share with you what the experience was that I had with a perfect stranger that could have been any one of our clients, right? So this was a pretty fun experience for me. And the takeaway that I really want for you guys is to realize that based on what we talked about last time, so 2 weeks ago when we met, if you ask the right questions and you listen to what the client and the body is telling you, you'll be able to get to a solution in no time flat. Now, it does require, of course, that we have a thorough background in anatomy and physiology, of course, and so that's okay. And as long as you have that and you can strategically put all the pieces together, you can solve someone's pain in no time flat. And so that's what happened. And so let me give you a real life example of what can happen for you too. So I was at a social event. Actually, I was with my folks, and it was their group of friends. So this matters, right? So their age, their demographic matters a bit. So it was people in, let's say, 50s to 70s in that age range. And why do you think that matters, right? So like I said last week when we were formulating intakes, every bit of information that we have about a person, their history, or what the body shares with us matters. So why do you think the age matters when it comes to what I'm about to share with you? Even though you don't know what I'm about to share with you, why does it matter that we pay attention to a client's age? And it's not about age, right? Like I'll give you that. It has nothing to do with their age, but their minutes on the planet gives us some information about the treatment plan that we're going to put together for them. So what do you guys know? You can use the chat if you want to type that in. What do you guys know about bodies that have been on the planet 50 to 70 years. What is the one thing that stands out for you? I really want there to be one thing that stands out for you. So go ahead and type that in the chat if you know it. So carrying on then, while you guys are formulating your responses here, I was at a social event and we were standing. It was the beginning of the gathering. So we were standing, all having, a cool something to drink. And the person that I was speaking to also standing. Why does standing matter? Why does standing matter? Standing matters because it gives us information about their function and the muscles that are creating that function. Alignment. So Laura, are you saying alignment matters on age? And if so, elaborate on that for me. And by the way, Laura, thank you for your email. Laura sent me an email about stretching doesn't exist. I love it. Yes, I was chuckling from ear to ear. I love that. I love that. And I love that you thought of me too. I love that I'm in your ear in that way. That makes me super happy. Okay, so I'm at a social event. The woman that I'm speaking to is standing. We're all standing. And in the middle of a sentence, she buckles, her legs look like they buckle under her a little bit. And she reaches for her hip with both hands and says, "Oh my goodness, oh my goodness." So of course she has all of my attention, even more than what she was sharing socially. And I'll pause there. There's some information coming in on the chat. What do you guys think if someone's standing in front of you, no problem standing, and then midway through a sentence grabs their hip? What do you think that is? So Jetty says, is it Jetty or Jedi? I feel like Jedi. Jetty says more injuries, old bad habits, and slow recovery with age. Yes, that's true. That's true. And there's another really big piece. It's actually part of my method. It's touchstone 3 in the Schatz method. So I want you to have this one as well. Guess again, continue with your guess. Those are all amazing. And there's one other really big piece that will also, let me give you more information on that. It will also start immediately answering what to do in a treatment plan. Okay, so like, yeah, they have old habits, they have injuries, they have slow recovery, but what does that tell me about what I'm going to do for that person in that moment? So this next piece about their age tells me what I'm going to do for them in this moment. Laura, with age, I was saying maybe time under load or wear and tear on the body. Yep, sure. There's a specific type of time and what that equals in the body that I'd love for you to come up with. So I'm going to give that back to you. Guess again. I love it. I love it. See, the strategic thinking is the biggest tool I believe that we all have in our toolbox, because we can have all the information that has ever been delivered. And if we don't know how to strategically put it together and make meaning out of it, all of the information isn't valuable. So our strategic thinking is as valuable as the information we have on anatomy and physiology. Hey, Wendy, I'm glad you're here. Nice to see you. So let's continue. So I'm standing at a social gathering with people I don't know. I've just met them for the first time. A woman in her late 50s, early 60s is standing with me conversing. And midway through a sentence, looks like her leg buckles underneath her and she reaches for her hip and says, "Oh no, oh no." I'm not laughing. I'm smiling because it's so easy for us to help her. It's so easy for us to help her. So anything come to mind for you? Anything come to mind for you? Because something came to mind for me right away, like out of the gate. And then just as we talked about last week, I really emphasized is a better choice of words. I really emphasized last week that when we ask questions, because right, we need more information than her name and that her leg buckled underneath her, right? Like I need more than that. But if I'm going to bother asking questions, and when you ask questions, that the key takeaway in question asking is the answer to the question, not the question itself, but the answer to the question should send you in a very clear direction, either left or right, right? It should create a fork in the road and it should send you on your journey somewhere, so that the answer to the question is part of our strategic thinking. What do you think the answer could be if you asked a question? And what would that answer take you to? What direction would that answer take you to? So pretend you're me. You're standing in a social gathering with a woman who's all of a sudden reaching for her hip. What would you ask? What would the first or second question be? Hey, William, I'm glad you're here too. Always on the road, William. You're always on the move. I'm glad you're keeping it safe, hands-free. Any ideas what questions you would ask? And just as I mentioned last time, my reason for asking you to think strategically is not in any way to put you on the spot or to make you uncomfortable. My reason for asking you the questions and the way that I formulate them is to start generating that strategic thinking, right? Because I can't do the thinking for you. Nobody can. I can give you all the information, but I want you to be able to piece it together. So, and if nothing comes up, if you're like, Gina, this is where I really get like sweaty palms, I don't know what questions to ask. That's okay. That's okay. Because that's part of the training too. That's part of learning, right? So any ideas? Before I give away the question that I asked, any ideas? Anybody have any ideas on a question? Wendy, you're about to answer. You're muted. Can you come off mute and tell us what's on your mind? Should be on the bottom left, maybe. You're mute. There you go.
I got it.
Hey.
Okay, can you hear me?
I can.
This is cool. This is the first time I've done this.
I'm so glad you're here.
Thanks. It's great to have a live connection going on because I've done these and it's like nobody ever hears me or answers my questions. So.
Oh, well, I love questions. I will answer them all.
Fun. So
yeah.
I guess my first intuitive reaction would be, I would ask, is something going on with your hip? Or what's going on with your hip? Or do you have something going on with your hip?
Yep. Beautiful. And what do you think the answer to that question would do? What direction would the answer to that question send you in?
Well, my gut instinct would be that, like most people, she'd probably, what's the right word? Not diminish, but she would probably try to make it so that no big deal. Like, I don't need to get involved kind of. A lot of people do that where they don't want you to, they don't necessarily, want to get into the whole thing right there in a social setting. So they're going to not really, necessarily, because they're in a social setting, they're not necessarily there specifically to be treated for that. Mm-hmm. So that isn't the time for them to really get into that, right? So they're going to be kind of like, oh yeah, my hip's been bothering me, this kind of thing, or just kind of blow it off sort of thing, right?
Okay. So yes, I'm going to press back and let's keep going with this, Wendy. So 2 weeks ago, I taught a class here. It sounds like you might not have been there. So I'm going to bring that information in so that you have a fair shake. That's okay. One of the big pieces that I talked about in that last training was when we ask a question. Let me back up. The reason I had this training a few classes back was because we were focused on how do we generate a treatment plan or a protocol or a movement class, whatever it is that you're up to in the world. How do we create one that's going to generate results in that moment, in that session with our client? And one of the big keys to that, in my experience, is to ask questions that are going to, in their answer, send me in a specific direction. Because what we don't want to do in a first session is spend 10 or 15 minutes of someone's 60-minute session cutting the breeze, shooting the breeze, cutting the crap, whatever phrase we want to use here. We don't want to just be like talking just to fill the air with oxygen. I ask questions in a way that whatever they're answering, I'm already putting together what I'm going to do for them in the rest of the minutes that we have together. So given that information, does that change or confirm your question that you would ask this person, Wendy? And I don't mind the answer. I just want to make sure that you have all the information.
I got to think about that. So
okay.
Does that change or confirm the way I ask the question?
What your question would be. Mm-hmm. Does it change or confirm what your question would be?
Okay, so now you're talking about we're in the treatment room and taking the initial, the intake, right? I've got them in the treatment room, not like in a social setting.
Well, let me just be clear. In the class that I taught last, I was talking about in the treatment room, but it applies anywhere. right? So here I am in a social setting. She's not a client of mine, and I still want to support her. I still want to handle that hip pain for her. So it's the same. I'm not gonna put it this way. Let me give you a different version of the scenario. If I'm standing in front of someone, social or not, and they're in hip pain, I'm not going to ask them about the weather, right? Because the answer to that question is going to do nothing for them.
Right.
It's going to do very little for me.
Yeah.
I'm not going to ask that question.
Right.
But I am always, with my practitioner hat on, interested in getting people out of pain. I don't care if they're on the street in New York City. I've stopped people on the street in New York City when I lived there. Real story. And I also stopped this person at a social gathering and helped her too. So I don't have any limits. They don't have to be in my treatment room. I'm just not charging if it's in person in the wild somewhere.
Okay.
So back to it. You're standing and talking to someone you don't know. They reach for their pain. They're wincing. They're in sudden, severe pain. Like, oh my gosh. Right? Mm-hmm. Would you still ask the same question? And if so, awesome. And if not, what would it be?
So I guess I would ask what exactly is going on, and then I would decide if there's something I could do to help.
Okay, great. And so what we're going to work with today is how do we decide if there's something we can do to help? So keep that, hang on to that thought. Awesome. And the reason I asked the question, Wendy, and I love your answer, is at first I heard you say, she might just try to blow it off and, it's in a social setting and she might not want to get help. Totally true. Absolutely true, right? Especially if you're talking to a stranger. And we want to ask questions that the answer will get us towards how we can help. So knowing that a client, she's not even a client, knowing that a stranger might want to deflect a little bit, that's great. That's great to know that she might want to deflect. So what kind of questioning could I ask where I could still get enough information and not put her on the spot, right? Because she's in public. So yes, I would ask, is something going on? And I did. I said, are you having hip trouble? Is this an ongoing thing? And her answer very clearly, almost in desperation, was, no, I don't know what this is. This just happened, like just right now. Okay, cool. So does that answer give you any more information? And this is for everybody. It's not just Wendy. Wendy's not volunteered to be on the hot seat, but I put you on the hot seat. Way to go. Way to play, Wendy. I love it.
I know. And I'm just kind of waking up, and I'm thinking about what am I going to have for breakfast? Well, like, wait a minute, I was going to do meditation. I usually do meditation first thing. And now I'm like, I'm stuck now.
Okay, well, that's okay. I get it. Before meditation can be a little tricky. You don't have to be on the hot seat on this one, but you're welcome to if you want to. I'll just keep going for the rest of us. And Wendy, if you want to jump in. That's awesome.
How many people are on here?
There's usually, not everybody's on camera and not everybody comes off mute. So a lot of people listen in and they comment on the videos or they'll email me later.
Oh, but everybody can hear me.
Everybody that's listening can hear you and hear me. Yep. And if somebody unmutes, you'll hear them as well.
Yay,
so that's
the highlight of my week.
Yay. I'm so glad. Okay. So I'm standing in front of this lovely woman who has sudden onset hip pain and she's looking a little nervous, right? She looked me in the eye when I said, is this a chronic thing? Have you been having hip pain? No, this just happened. She looks a little shocked, right? Of course, because she's in a lot of pain. So I look at where her hand is. She's got two hands though, covering her whole innominate. So that doesn't give me enough information because there's so many muscles there and so many muscles that attach there and so many joint actions that happen in that 360 joint that where her hands are don't give me enough information. And let me just pause here and say, if you're still not clear on the muscles that attach there and their actions and the joint actions that are available in the hip, I want you to go back and get that information. Because the only way that we can put together a treatment plan is if we have a solid foundation of anatomy. So you can go back to the training that you had and review your notes. If you want new training, of course, I have that as well. We have applied functional anatomy. We have muscles and movement. Those two courses are amazing for this exact answer. What's the body parts? What do they do? And what happens when they're not acting the way they should act, right? So awesome. we want to have the answers to those questions. So I'm looking for the answer to that question while I'm talking to this lovely person. And both of her hands are covering her innominate. So I can't tell exactly where she's pointing. So the next question I asked was, is the pain in a specific spot that you can point to? Yes, she says. It's right here. Well, sort of, but it's like, it feels like I can't quite get my fingers to it. So what does that tell you? What are you hearing in your mind when someone says, I know exactly where the location is, but I can't reach it. It's too deep in my body. That should trigger something for you and which muscle it could be versus which muscle it isn't. Does anything come to mind for anyone? They know exactly.
What comes to mind for me is how complex the body is and how it's interconnected. And it's like where the pain is isn't necessarily where, you know, it could be her QLs, it could be lower back, it could be, you know, coming from her soleus or gastrocs or God knows, you know, or, you know, it could be so many things.
It could be, Wendy. And that's exactly why we're here every week going through it. Because if we're overwhelmed with how many things it could be, we're never going to get to the solution. And what we want to do is be in service, right? We want to solve it for our people. And it's always solvable, by the way. Yes, the body is remarkably complex and it's always solvable, right? That's one thing that I am positive about. I don't really mind what pain someone brings to me. I know there's a solution. I'm like so unruffled at this point by any pain or injury, even referred pain, compensatory pain, post-surgical, pre-surgery, doesn't matter. Bring me your pain. I will help solve it with you, right? That's my motto. And I want that to be for you too, right? That's why I train, because I want
it to be for me too, actually. Yes.
Great. Well, then you're in the right place. I'm glad you're here today. So this is exactly the kind of strategic thinking and treatment plan protocol that we do in the mastery program. It's actually the whole final module, the whole last part of the program. This is exactly what we do. And as you can tell, it takes a bit to go through. So we're going to, only get through this one person this one time because it was such a fun story. Jedi and Laura, you both put in the chat. Jedi, you put deep muscles. Yes. And which category are the deep muscles in? Laura, you called it intrinsic. So intrinsic muscles are deeper in, you can't palpate them. If you're a manual practitioner, intrinsic muscles are muscles J-die. J-die, did I get it? J-die, D-Y-E, could be either way. Give me one more pronunciation. Thank you so much for doing that. Yes, J-die. I love it. I didn't even come close. Thank you so much for correcting me. I'm so happy to know your name as in Star Wars. I thought it was Jedi in Star Wars. Anyway, I don't want to.
I know, me too.
Right? J-die. Okay. I'm so grateful for the clarity. Okay, cool. So when you're a manual practitioner and you're used to palpating, you will not be able to palpate an intrinsic muscle. It's too many layers deep and close to the bone and not palpable. However, you can still affect them. Whether you are a movement practitioner or a manual practitioner, it is mandatory that you know intrinsic muscles, where they are, what they do, and how to affect them. And so, like I said at the very beginning, in my method, intrinsic muscles is a whole touchstone of our method. And you don't have to be a manual practitioner or a movement practitioner to get that, because all practitioners should know what intrinsic muscles are, what they do, and how to affect them. I firmly believe that. It was literally the piece that got me to have this method trademarked, because it's just different. The way we do manual and movement work is just a bit different than what's been done, which is super awesome. And I don't mean to brag, but it's just really important is the point I'm trying to make here. So intrinsic muscles are muscles that would be too deep for us to palpate, which she told me, she confirmed it. And it's also the piece that comes to mind in her age bracket, because the longer we're on gravity, the weaker intrinsic muscles get unless we are deliberately strengthening them. That is a huge takeaway, guys. Huge takeaway. You got to know that. And we get to insert what we know about intrinsic muscles and how to affect them, because someone in that age bracket, whether she had immediate hip pain or not, onset in a social gathering or not, we know that the longer we're fighting gravity, the more intrinsic strength we require in order to have balance in our body. So now I've heard in my brain twice intrinsic muscles. right? I've heard intrinsic come up the first time when I recognized her age range, her demographic, and the second time when she told me where the pain was too deep for her to touch. Okay, great. So now I know that I'm in the two groups of muscles, phasic and intrinsic. And again, if you don't know that, please do the muscles and movement course so that you do know that. It's hugely different. It affects how you teach movement and how you work manually. So in those two classifications, categories of muscles, I know now that I'm not looking at a phasic muscle. I am looking for an intrinsic muscle, which automatically cuts my muscles in half. Like the number, takes about 150 muscles, 150 phasic muscles off the table that I don't have to think about in that very moment. Because I'm looking for an answer quickly, right? I'm looking for an answer super quickly. So the next thing I asked her was, because now I know that this is not a chronic problem. She's not having pain. She's not being seen by a doctor or anything like that. It just happened. It caught her off guard and it's intrinsic, which makes sense when you know what intrinsic muscles do. It makes sense why her leg buckled underneath her. That exactly confirms it, right? And the next thing I asked her was, what did you do yesterday and today physically? Which would also fill in the gaps. If she told me that she did nothing and she was a couch potato, that would give me different information about her body and what her body's up to. If she told me she did a very specific activity, I would go back to the information that I have about joint actions and the muscles that create those actions. And I would be picturing them in my brain while she's telling me what her physical activity is. And I would be calling out in my brain the muscles that she's working with, so that I could help identify which one had trouble with the physical activity she was up to, right? And so she told me that the physical activity that she did was a movement, kind of like aerobic type dancey thing at her club that she's done 1 million times. Great. So I know that it's nothing new. Her body's used to it. And this time it's just something slightly different. And I said, okay, well, if I could solve this for you or attempt to solve it for you, would you be interested in that? Right? So I'm asking for consent, basically. I'm asking for permission. What we don't want to do is like hover over someone. Oh, I can do it. Like, don't do that, guys. That's like super 1984. Don't do that. Like, that's not how we're in service anymore. Invite them in, right? You hear me talk about this all the time. Partner with your people. Partner with your clients. You're not the expert in the room and they're not the subordinate. You two are there together. They have information that you can't have without them, and you have skill and tools and anatomy knowledge that they don't have without you. The two of you are a partnership in their rehab, right? Or in their recovery, whatever you're up to with them. So partner with them and get rid of the whole I'm the healer idea. No, we're not actually. We're guiding them to move their body, and their movement is what's going to heal them. We're not doing that for them. We're guiding them. We're partnering with them for sure. Okay. So I got consent. I asked if she wanted to resolve it, and she said yes. And interestingly enough, Wendy, just as you mentioned, she's in a social setting. There's all this attention on her. Her friends are swarmed around her. They're all nervous. She's in a lot of pain. And just before I was about to help her, she said, you know what? I'm so uncomfortable. I think I'm just going to go home. Sad face. So what I know, because of the muscle that I was targeting, what I know is that if she went home and didn't have that muscle released from the trouble it was into, her pain would only get worse. And every step that she would take the next day would be compromised because of the muscle that was the problem, which I'll tell you in a minute. Because I know what that muscle does. I know what that muscle is responsible for. And I know the actions that her body would go into to need that muscle. So I knew that if I let her go home, if I adopted her nervousness, I would actually be doing something mean, because I know that she would be worse if she went home. And the only way I can know that, the only way you can know that, is if you're absolutely clear on what it is that's causing the problem. And if you're absolutely clear on what's causing the problem and you can see further out what that muscle will continue to do in that body, or what that body will require of that muscle, then you can start seeing into the future, believe it or not, and then reverse engineering into this moment. And so I knew, I was 99.9% sure what the muscle was. And I knew that it would be a huge problem for her if we didn't release it, because it's not going to release on its own. And she's going to keep using that muscle. So I said to her, if you had just another minute and a half, or like maybe 3 minutes most, would you be willing to try before you went home? Because I think we might be able to resolve it. And that's all it took. And she said, sure. Can I sit down? Absolutely. Get comfortable. So anybody have any idea what muscle I'm talking about? So we know it's in the hip. We know it's intrinsic. We know that it was responsible for her leg buckling underneath her. We know that it caused tremendous pain. And I just told you that my assessment of that muscle was that it was going to carry out into her future. So Jedi, piriformis, psoas, gluteus medius. So those are 3 awesome guesses. They do very, very different things. So tell me how you came to those 3 guesses. And the reason I'm putting you on the hot seat again, just like I did to Wendy, is so that we can, get more laser, so that we can zero in on exactly what we're going to do and not like bounce around on, well, it could be this or it could be that. And what we don't want to do if I have 3 minutes with someone is that I want to start chopping vegetables and tossing a salad. I want to like get in there, right?
Yeah,
and the same thing. Yeah. And the same thing in your treatment, right? Like you have 60 minutes with someone, you don't want to leave them half baked and then wonder if they're going to reschedule because you didn't really help them that week. Or worse, you kind of help them and then they go on for a whole week of compensatory patterning because you didn't actually resolve it, which makes their pain worse and your session with them harder next week. So that's why I'm pushing back on this one, Jedi. Piriformis, what would lead you to think it's piriformis based on the information we have from this person's body? And I've shared everything with you that I had from her. Like there's nothing that I'm holding back. Just a hunch from my own troubles. No worries. That's okay. So again, I'm appealing to all of you. Please, 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 please dive into more muscle action training, right? Muscles and movement is a great course because we do exactly this. Here's the muscle, here's what it is, here's the classification that it's in, here's the action that it takes. And these are the muscles that help it do that. So that you can start piecing together, okay, if my body's doing this, then it's this muscle. If my body can't do that, it's also that muscle that can't do it, right? And so you want to be able to know that. And my experience as a massage therapist is that we were taught all the muscles and all the attachment points, but we don't really know how they move because everybody's passive, right? They're all laying on the table, they're passive.
Yeah.
And movement practitioners like yogis and personal trainers, they know how to move, but they don't always know what muscle is doing the work. So then if something goes wrong, they can't like troubleshoot on the fly what to target, right? Because it's either like you either can move this way or you can't move that way, but they don't really have an ability to piece it out and get to just the agonist in a reciprocal inhibition. I hope you guys know what that is. Please tell me you know what reciprocal inhibition is and what the agonist is. You want to always be able to target the agonist. All right. So Jada, you had one of your guesses. Gluteus medius was the muscle. Gluteus medius.
That was the first one I thought of.
Oh, good for you. Okay. Why did you think that, Wendy?
Minimus or medius?
Why did you think that one? Why was that your guess?
I don't know.
Oh, okay. All right. So you, Wendy, and Jada, and probably the rest of us too, I want you to have your why, right? Like in the same way that when we ask a client a question, we want to know why we're bothering to ask that. When we have a hunch, we want to have something behind that hunch. Yes, we're all intuitive. Body workers typically are. And I want you to have a why behind it. Because if you have a why.
I want a why too.
Okay, good. Well, okay, great. Well, great. I want that for you too. And that's also why I'm glad you're here. If you have a why, you're guessing a particular problem, muscle, something. If you have the answer to why you're guessing it, you are now in partnership with the body. And when you're in partnership with the body, you'll get to a solution. If you're just guessing and you don't have a why, you're kind of out here hoping for an answer. And the body that you're working on is here. So you need to have like, I think you're telling me this. Are you telling me this? Because I'm telling you that. Are you responding to that? Oh, cool. All right. Where do we go, body? Right? And you want to be in relationship with the body that you're working on and have a dialogue with that body because it will tell you if you're on track or not every single time. Okay. So I guessed it was gluteus medius because gluteus medius is both phasic and intrinsic. It's on that side of her hip. right? That's where it lives. And to your point, Wendy, 80% of the pain in the body is referred from somewhere else. Absolutely. 20% of the time it isn't though. And this came on in the second. So this was almost like an acute onset. It wasn't compensatory, which is usually where we get referral pain. And so it led me even more to think that it was gluteus medius because it happened right there, almost like for a split second, that muscle is going, ah, which led me to, if we didn't address gluteus medius, because you need it when you walk, she would walk to her car, get out of her car and walk into her house and sit, and we wouldn't have addressed the muscle and she would have needed that muscle the whole time. Then we would have been into compensatory behavior. Laura, you're popping on. You got a question? No. Okay. Well, super happy to see you and hear you and for you to hear me. Okay. So what I know about gluteus medius, it's both intrinsic and phasic. It's on the lateral side of the hip. It is in its intrinsic action, a hip stabilizer. It literally takes the pelvis and hugs it together. Do you remember when we started our journey together with this lovely woman that what I said to you was she was standing? She was standing and all of a sudden she couldn't stand because she's standing needing gluteus medius, and all of a sudden gluteus medius is like, I'm on vacation. It's Friday night. We're good, right? And we don't want gluteus medius to go on vacation. The other thing that I know about gluteus medius, in the fact that it is intrinsic and phasic, we know that because of her age, we're working on intrinsic muscles, right? We already established that. So all signs point to gluteus medius here. Hip stabilizing, intrinsic, and age range. Okay, cool. And the inability to stand all of a sudden. So how do you address any muscle if it's in duress? This is a very loaded question, which we probably won't even get to the answer to right now. I'm looking at the time. But I want you to have that answer, because if you can identify the muscle, and you can, some of us might want to, be diligent as we're addressing like which muscle, the why are you getting to that muscle really matters. Answer those questions for yourself so that you're not all over the board in muscle action and joint function and all kinds of things. Because I really had a strong hunch on gluteus medius, now I get to go to, well, how do I address that? The way you address a muscle is by putting it into its action. And if it can't, you support it there. How do you put a muscle into its action if you don't know its action? You don't. So please learn muscles and movement so that you can, right? And this can be whether you're, like I said, movement or manual practitioner. If someone that you are working with can't stand anymore and their gluteus medius needs support, you can support them, whether you're a movement or manual practitioner. So what I know about gluteus medius is that it also has, luckily, a phasic action. Anybody know the phasic action of glute med? Phasic action of glute med? Going once, going twice.
It is a
Let me see. It would be in extensor of the hip.
That would be glute max.
Sorry.
No worries. You don't need to apologize.
Is it a lateral rotator?
It's the opposite of that.
Shit.
It's a medial rotator. It's a medial rotator. I love that you guessed though, Wendy.
Well, I actually forgot one of its attachments, so I forgot. Yeah.
That's okay. The truth is that the way I work with muscles, I focus now more on their action, the movement that they do, and the classification more than where they attach. And I say that as a massage therapist, right? I'm licensed in several states. I knew all the attachments at one point, and knowing the attachments didn't help me get the muscle out of trouble. All it helped me do was get to target manually their attachment point. But doing that is amazing. I still keep all my licenses. I still think we all should get massages every day. And targeting the attachment of a muscle doesn't teach it to move. Just doesn't. It does other things. So what I want to do is restore function. And if we're going to restore function, we have to restore how the muscle moves. And so that's why now I'm not as strong, like my memory on all the names of all the attachments is not as strong as the muscle actions. I've got those because I want to restore their function. Okay. So I know that glute med does medial rotation, which means I can take this person's hip into medial rotation and target that muscle. Great. Now she's already seated though, right? She's uncomfortable. She can't stand. She can't use the intrinsic action of glute med. That's okay, because I know it also does a phasic action that I can target while she's seated. So if I was going to target the action of glute med, which is medial rotation, it's phasic action of medial rotation, how would you do that while someone's sitting on a sofa? Any ideas? What would you do?
Okay, so medial rotation. Bring the foot out to the side. I would take their ankle and just kind of do a movement, a rotational movement with their hand on the knee and the ankle, and just kind of do a little rotational thing.
Rotation to which direction, Wendy?
I would bring the ankle out to the side, laterally out to the side, and try to do an internal rotation of the femur.
So you would turn their toes to an outside, a lateral pointed direction, and then you would do something with their femur?
Yeah, I'd grab their ankle with one hand and the other hand on the knee, and just kind of do a little bit of a torquing, where you're internally rotating the femur in the hip there, just doing a little internal rotation.
And why would you take the toes to the opposite direction then? Just curious.
The toe.
Why would you take the toes out and the knee femur in?
Because that is an internal rotation, an internal rotation of the hip, isn't it?
At the femur, yes, but it sounds like what you're describing from the knee down is a different direction.
Because the femur is the hip up there where it attaches up there. The trochanter is attaching into the acetabulum or whatever.
Correct.
So, well, you said the glute medius is an internal rotator.
It is. So maybe I misheard you.
Medial rotator.
Let's use her left leg, because actually it was her left hip, by the way. So if you were working with someone's left leg, would you turn their toes out to 10 o'clock or towards 2 o'clock? Left leg.
Okay, so they're laying supine.
No, she's sitting in a chair. She's sitting in a chair.
Okay, ask the question again.
Yeah. I heard you say, to me, it sounded like you said you would rotate her toes in one direction and her femur in the other direction. And I'm just asking for clarity on that. Is that what you said?
Yes, I did. It was like, I would kind of get it, like just kind of take the knee here and the ankle and kind of go like that and just try to do a little.
Okay. So the reason I wouldn't do that with someone who's not a client, or actually even with someone who is a client, unless I was really working on them, is because you don't want to take the knee joint and torque it. It doesn't have rotation available to it. So this is a person in their 60s.
Oh, okay.
And I have no history on them, and I wouldn't want to dislocate their knee joint.
Right.
Yeah. So I wouldn't take their knee in the middle of a thigh going in one direction and ankle going in another. I just wouldn't do that.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Awesome. Jada, you say put your fist between her knees and ask her to rotate inwards while pushing on fists. So meaning that she would push her femur onto your fist. Is that what you mean by that? And that's cool. I can't. Yes. Okay, great. So what could happen in that instance? She's a stranger. I'm not putting my hands between anyone's legs. She's a stranger to me. I don't know her. I don't even have permission to touch her, but I like what you're talking about, as long as her squeezing your fist doesn't create a deduction, because what we're looking for is medial rotation. It's a very different joint action. So again, we want to know exactly what the joint action is and how to put the body into that position. So what I did with her was I had her seated. Well, she was seated. What I had her do was to extend her knee a little bit, right? So that her leg was in front of her where she could see it. And I had her do medial rotation. I had her roll her toes to her midline. So I said, roll your toes. It was her left leg, roll your toes to the right. And when she did that, interestingly enough, she shifted her whole pelvis. She almost put her weight on her right hip and shifted to the right. So that definitely told me that she didn't want to do freaking medial rotation. That muscle was like, no. And so I just gently guided her. This was all verbally, by the way. I'd never touched her. And I'll tell you why in a minute. I said, go ahead and stay seated. Just keep your hips square. And with your leg outstretched in front of you, just roll your toes to the right. And that was hard for her, of course.
That's perfect.
Right. Super simple for us, super simple for them, targeting exactly the muscle, not creating any other problem. Right.
Yeah.
And then again, I did not have permission to touch her. I never got signed consent. And while she's not a paid client, if I don't have permission to touch someone, I don't. And you shouldn't either, by the way. I don't like to shit on people, but that's kind of a biggie now.
Yeah.
So she had her shoes on. I had my shoes on. And I said, is it okay with you if I just put my shoe against your shoe? And she's like, yeah, sure. And I did that. And I put resistance on the lateral side of her foot. And I basically walked her through PNF, which is the way to activate a muscle and deactivate Golgi tendon organs. And if you don't have PNF in your toolbox, please get that in your toolbox. I have a masterclass on it. In no time flat, you will know how to do PNF, even remotely. I even use that remotely when I'm working virtually with clients if I'm not in the room with them. So we walked through PNF, which as you know, if you know PNF, it's a 6 to 8 second phenomenon. You do it twice. Within 20 seconds, we were done. Literally, it took me longer to talk to her about her hip pain than it did to resolve it. I didn't know if it was going to work. I sure as heck hoped it would. That was definitely what I was there for. And then we had her stand up. And at this point, all of her friends are hovered over her, right? Because there's like a really tight knit group of loving, connected friends, and they're all hovering, right? And she stood up and she started rubbing her hands, her two hands again on the side of her hip where they had been. She's like, this is incredible. This is incredible. It doesn't hurt at all. And her friends were like, oh, that's so great. But I know that gluteus medius is involved in stabilizing the hip in every step. In one-legged standing, gluteus medius is the muscle of the agonist. And I said, go ahead and take a few steps. Because if we hadn't fully released it, she wouldn't have been able to take a few steps pain-free. But she did. She walked all around the couch that she was sitting on. And then we all went back to our party and she stayed for the rest of the night. And later, folks were saying, I can't believe you almost left. I'm so glad you stayed for the night. And I could not help but like get back and tell you guys, like, you guys, you can do this even with people you don't know, right? Like, it's just, you got to know what the muscle is that's up to trouble and how, what tool you can use to intervene and then how to get yourself back on track. So, and the key really is quick, right? She was a stranger. She wasn't going to let me tinker around and lift up her leg. She was wearing a skirt, by the way. So I'm not going to lift her leg and put my hand between her knees, and I'm not going to do that. So you want to be able to have lots of tools and like know which one to bring out and then what result you're looking for. So my reason for sharing that with you is A, because it's super exciting that the body responds that way. And B, these could be your results, guys. These could be your results. This is exactly the type of stuff that we work on. This is the Schatz method. I mean, that's basically what I was up to. And we work on these types of case studies and treatment plans in the last complete quarter of our program. So
because I've been starting to learn the coaching the body stuff.
Yeah, with Chuck. He's amazing.
So, yeah.
Yeah, I have lots of, a few practitioners, and I think there's 4 practitioners in my program who also did his work too. It's great. It's great tools. It's great. I adore Chuck. He's a dear friend of mine. But we do different stuff, right? He doesn't do my method and I don't do his. And so it depends on what you're up to and what you're looking for. Okay, so I went on a little longer because we kind of like put in Q&A in between there. I went on a little longer than I typically do, and I still want to open up the room here for any questions. Does anyone have any questions that I can support you with answering while we're here in our last few minutes together today. Any questions? It doesn't have to be on what we talked about. It doesn't have to be on our fabulous glute med story. It could be, but we
How
watched
often
that.
do you do these?
Every week. We're here every Tuesday.
Oh my gosh, at 10 a.m. and I'm in Denver.
Yes, 12 Eastern.
Where are you?
I'm in the East. I'm in Eastern time zone. Depends on what. Yeah. Yeah. But you have more sun than I do. So you should, your time zone works for you. It's perfect.
Okay. So every Tuesday. All right. Well, that I would love to do that.
Wonderful. Yeah. We have a couple, we usually keep the replays. So as you know, we're streaming live into YouTube right now, and we keep the recordings live. We keep the live recordings available for replay. Wow, that was jumbled. We keep them up for 2 weeks. And I've had some questions like, well, how come I can't get to an old one? Because we take them down and we splice them up. So we're putting a resource library together based on the topic that we talk about on any particular day. So once they're spliced, they're not there anymore. So that's why. Jedi, let me see your love notes. This is great. No touch healing. I thought she gave you consent, but I guess written is better. What do you think for trigger point on Medius, which is what I may have tried? Thanks a lot. Great question. So she did give me consent to work with her, but she didn't give me consent to touch. And that consent I always get in writing. And I think that we all should, whether we're movement or manual practitioners. And the reason is because there's licensing around touch therapy. And so if we are respecting our license, then we are respecting it in all ways. We're not just running around with, a loaded gun kind of thing. So she did give me consent to address her hip trouble, but she did not give me written consent to touch her. I did, but I pressed my shoe against her shoe. and so that was it. But my hand stayed in my lap, and so did hers. Think about it, right? Like, let's say she was uncomfortable or it didn't work, and I had done something like lifted her leg and torqued her knee and re-triggered a torn meniscus that she had in her past, or she had a skirt on and she thought I looked up her skirt, or, like, think about that. Like, you don't want to do any of that shit. And like, no. So no touch until I have consent and they're dressed appropriately and we're in private. So that's why I didn't do touch therapy. And what do I think about trigger point therapy? I do trigger point therapy. I think trigger point therapy is amazing, and it's painful for folks. So I would not have done that in that setting. Even if I had consent for hands-on, I wouldn't have done it in that setting, because I find that folks who are anxious, the trigger point work is less effective because they're anxious and it's churning up more sensation for them. And PNF seems to be the tool that, as long as they can push 20 to 30% effort on an agonist, we're good, right? Like I can get that to release. So I would start with something that was less strenuous for them, less invasive for them, and certainly, no hands unless I get written consent for that. So I hope that answered your question. Okay, awesome, great. Any other questions while we're here? Anybody have any other questions? I swear an hour goes by like that every time. I'm going to make all day Tuesdays.
I thought it'd been like 20 minutes.
I know. Time flies when you're having fun, right? And this anatomy is so fun for me.
Yeah, because you're really East Coast intense, and I kind of like that, because you're like, man, you're you got the, it's really smart. Yeah, because you don't want to just, you can't bank on your good intentions. Sometimes people are going to, because we do live in a litigious society. So it's like you have to be very careful about, violating somebody's space, I guess, and all that.
Yeah, we do live in a litigious society, but what I would rather us think about is not like how everybody's out to get everybody, but more like they've already been in pain and been let down a lot in their life. So I don't want to give them one more moment of hope, but not actually get them any results, right? By the time people come to see me with chronic pain, they've seen 7 to 9 other practitioners. I'm not screwing around with their time anymore or their money, right? I'm either going to help them or I can't, but I don't want to just be nice to them. They're tired. They're tired of being in pain typically. And that doesn't apply necessarily to this person's particular case, but that's one of the driving forces in my expediency when I'm putting a treatment plan together. And I appreciate you saying, Wendy, that I'm East Coast intense. I did live in New York for many, many years, but I'm a Midwesterner, so I have a heart of gold. So I just want to add that in there in case that's not being relayed.
I know. I knew when I said that I was just kind of being a little free.
That's all right.
I hope I don't offend her. But I have a question, because one of my customers the other day came in and she got a flu shot a couple months ago. And she said the woman that administered the shot was like really stressed out and over, just overscheduled. And so she went and stuck the shot supposedly higher than she was supposed to in her deltoid. And now she's got this there's an acronym for it. It's called CIRC or whatever. It's shoulder injury from vaccine reaction or whatever. So it's specifically from the vaccine. So she said she had this knot there for like, she got to where she couldn't lift her arms. So now she's doing all this physical therapy because she couldn't lift her arm up to put her clothes on and stuff. And she came in and I was like, they're telling her she has rotator cuff injury. And I'm thinking, wow. So what did the injection do? It went in there and she was really sore right at the pec minor, and there was like a swollenness right here. And so I kind of palpated that area a little bit. And of course I worked her infraspinatus and, the area. And, I think the injury maybe made her whole shoulder just kind of brace and raise up, and it probably goes up into her scalenes and her neck and everything. And it's like, I don't know, what do you do for that?
Mm-hmm. What's your question for me?
I just didn't know how to address that, where to go with that.
Was she coming to you? She was coming to you for manual therapy?
Yeah, for a massage. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Do you think that it was a physical injury, or do you think it was a different kind of injury? Do you think it was energetic?
It could be both.
Mm-hmm. So here's what I'm hearing, and I'm just going to make it quick only because of the time that we have left, Wendy. I heard you say that the shot was administered to her deltoid, which is not a rotator cuff muscle.
I know.
And then she went to physical therapy, which is a physical practice, but it's not helping. And they're calling it rotator cuff, which means either they have other information than you need to still fill in the gap, or they're off on a red herring somewhere because they can't figure it out. In either case, it's physical that she's been getting addressed, and it's not moving the needle, which leads me to another concept that we talk about in my method, which is a Venn diagram, that we're all humans are three parts. We're physical, energetic, and mental. And so what we want to do, and there's a Venn diagram means that they all overlap at one particular spot. So while we're all physical, whether we're manual or movement practitioners, and we're largely navigating the physical realm, folks come to us with an overlap of physical manifestations that are actually generated from another place.
Yeah.
And because it was a vaccine, which is, if you study homeopathics in any way, it's a frequency where they match the frequency in the body, and then the body's got to do something with that frequency. So there's already an energy exchange that's happened inside of a vaccine, and the bracing is an energetic bracing. That's not a physical bracing. And she's already had a physical modality that hasn't moved the needle. It leads me to think that you'd be working somewhere else other than just physical. And that's my very quick but short answer.
Interesting. Okay.
And again, I can't give any advice on a client that I haven't seen. So these are just ideas that are coming to mind based on the information you've given me, but there's no way that I can tell you that's actually what's going on for her. I don't have nearly enough information to answer the question fully.
Well, she just recently started the physical therapy, so maybe it will bring results because she's doing exercises and working the muscles and maybe helping it. Maybe it'll help milk it out. Who knows,
I wish her and everybody a pain-free life, for sure. For sure. Okay, my loves, we are at the top of the hour. Oh my goodness, time flies when we're having fun. I can't wait. It's great to meet you too. Thank you so much for coming and for participating so fully. I can't wait to see the rest of you also next week. And feel free to bring your friends. Your friends are always welcome. Somebody asked me that. If they're not getting your email, are they allowed to come? Yes, absolutely. They can register on Zoom and get the link and the whole bit. Absolutely. And the more the merrier. We're all here to support each other. And that's what I'm here to do, to continue to support you week after week. So I will see you all Tuesday, a week from now, noon Eastern. Okay?
Thank you.
See you then. Take care.